everyone, and welcome to Watching 100 Movies. I am Christiana Ellis.
I'm Mike Mateen.
And tonight, we are cracking the top 10 of the American Film Institute's top 100 movies of all time. American movies of all time. But we've broken into the top 10, So last episode, we reshuffled our list a little bit, but now here we are, top 10. You excited?
I am. This was I know, I think you have a difference of opinion, at least on one of them, but it was sort of a
Okay.
dubious entry into the top 10.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't, these are maybe probably two of my, I don't want to say least, I mean, out of the top 10, they're probably two of my least favorites out of which I guess they
I
are.
mean, out of the top 10, I mean, they are 9 and 10.
There are other movies on this list that I like better than both of these movies,
Hmm.
particularly in the genre or artist who put them together. Sort of the
Hmm.
reasons why they're on here. I'm not leaving either of these where it is. I'll just say that right now. So it
Oh,
was just
sure.
kind of funny that we're excited to get into the top 10, and I'm like, yeah, it's not, but it's just
Well,
a little bit better than that.
yeah, it's really just kind of a threshold, right? Because um, it has been the case throughout the list that we don't necessarily leave the movies where the AFI put them, right? And so that's going to continue to be true for the top 10. Maybe some of them will keep very high, but it doesn't have to be. But in the meantime, instead of sort of toying around with what those movies are, let's just go ahead and say tonight we're talking about number 10, The Wizard of Oz, and then number 9, Vertigo.
Yeah.
And so first up, of course, is The Wizard of Oz, 1939 fantasy slash children's movie. Everybody knows what The Wizard of Oz is? Do I have to explain? No, probably not.
Yeah.
I think that there are probably lots of people who have never actually watched it from start to finish, but it's one of those movies that, like, you almost don't have to have watched it to know almost everything there is to know about it. Do you want to just get right into it?
Yeah.
All right. So, I get where you're coming from. If this is one of the if you feel if this is one of the ones you were talking about in terms of you're going to lower it down, I get that. And frankly, when I sat down to watch it, that was my feeling before starting it. Was like, okay, it's the Wizard of Oz. Everybody knows it. They're like every scene has been riffed on 100,000 times,
I mean, there's
and
an entire alternative fiction to it that's become a Broadway play.
yeah. Well, and not only that, but there was another whole musical made of this kind of the same story. Like, it's first of all, it's adapted from a book. It's
Right.
not even actually the first movie adaptation of it. It had been a musical on stage before this movie. Um, it's been, there's the unofficial and pseudo official sequels to it. Weird conspiracy theories about A, suicide being visible on screen, B, syncing up mysteriously with Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah, I almost wanted to do that.
I watched a little bit of it. The thing is, it's much more interesting in concept than it is to actually watch, frankly. Because of course it is actually just a coincidence. It's a neat phenomena, but it's just silly to suggest that it's anything other than coincidence that's occasionally kind of neat.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, yeah, sorry. So I'm a little bit distracted because I just dropped a dice and Rocket picked it up, so I need to go retrieve that. I'll be right back. Hey, Rocket, leave that alone.
And I'm gonna go shut the door to my office so my dog doesn't push in here and interrupt us. Also,
I am sorry about that. Oh, just in
well,
time for you.
I noticed that my office door was cracked, and I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
want my dog pushing in
Hmm,
and interrupting us
right.
as well. So,
So, like, there's a million of these other little things going on, but just to sort of finish the thought, sitting down to watch it, that was my thinking about it, is that it's like some of the other movies we've talked about where it feels like this has been referenced and riffed on and parodied so many times that it's impossible for it to have its original impact. And I'm going to watch it, but I don't think I'll actually be fully engaged with it. And I was wrong. It got me. Like I found myself even very early on in the movie finding that I was not checking my phone to skim IMDb trivia about it while watching. I was not distracted by other things. I had a big, dumb, goofy smile on my face the whole time. And it worked on me. It worked its charms on me. And I was kind of delighted to find that. First of all, it was the first time in a long time that I actually sat down and watched it start to finish instead of just seeing a clip here or there. But yeah, I mean, that's not to say that I'm going to leave it in the top 10, but I liked it a lot more than I was kind of expecting to sitting down to watch it.
Yeah, and I think that I ended up, you and I talked a little bit about your experience offline, and that's why I'll let you go there. But I think I ended up having that experience that you thought you might have. I mean, I wasn't distracted or bored or anything like that. I don't want to say like I just had to start checking my phone or anything. I did watch it.
I'm listening. One thing, sorry, my dog is driving me. Okay.
Engaged in it.
He is rambunctious tonight. I don't know what's going on. All right. Should be good.
Yeah, so I mean, I was engaged in it. I see the charm in it. I wasn't completely like just disappointed in it. It just didn't
know it. Yeah, you know it by heart already. There's no surprise.
Yeah, and there was, I don't know. I think just even like getting into it, the Munchkin Land was annoying more than charming to me. And that kind of just put me on the wrong foot. And I try to get back into it, but like it really just, I don't know. It didn't feel as charming as I guess it did when I was younger or at a different time. And I don't want to say it felt, I don't know if exploitative was exactly it. Like I get they're all paid workers. I mean, but there was just something odd about it that, and with them all having the high pitched voices, it was kind of annoying. Like this sort of way they were all kind of characterized. And I get it's supposed to be kind of cartoonish. I don't know. Just the whole thing didn't just kind of knock me off kilter to open it. And I started to get back into it. I mean, Judy Garland is tremendous. Super charming. The songs are fun. The physical acting of the three companions, the lion, the scarecrow, and the Tin Man is amazing. I mean, that's on par with a Jim Carrey or any modern, or even an Andy Serkis. I mean, just different, but like from a physical body acting. I mean, these guys are at the top of their game, and that was fun. So I enjoyed a lot of that stuff. I enjoyed myself. I just doesn't, like I said, I had to get back into it after the beginning.
Yeah, I could see that. I think part of what kept me a little buoyant on the Munchkin Land bit is that it reminded me of a bit that I like from a cartoon miniseries called Over the Garden Wall.
Yeah, I like that series.
Yeah, it's great, right? Anyone who hasn't seen it should watch it. Autumn is really the best time, but you can watch it at any time. It's great. Check it out. It's easy and short consumable. But there is a point in that show where the younger brother is having a dream sequence that is very much inspired by a lot of old cartoons. And there's a bit where he gets received by various silly cartoony committees that is obviously a riff on the Munchkin Land bit with like the Lollipop Guild and so on. And I like that one. And watching the Munchkin Land one reminded me of that one. So maybe that kept me aloft a little bit. Because I think you're right. There are parts of it that feel a little bit like we maybe wouldn't make it like this today. On the other hand, as a bit of trivia, a lot of the actors who played the Munchkins were actually European Jews who took advantage of being hired to fly to America to escape the Nazis. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah. but yeah, at the same time, there are parts of that that feel a little bit like, are we giving these men and women the dignity that they really are ought to have here, or are we kind of
Yeah,
treating them as silly? And
right.
and
It
I
kind of
will,
makes them like adult children,
hmm,
as opposed to small people adults.
yeah,
It's almost like children that have grown up a little bit, but still act kind of like children. And again, with the high pitched
yeah,
voices, some of the goofy stuff, like, and it just lasts a little longer than I felt like it needed to, because
hmm,
like you said, there's the whole point of introducing all of the memberships and guilds, which ultimately like don't really have a ton of point in the movie. They're just
yeah.
kind of to extend that sequence and have the songs, and it just, I don't know, it more annoyed me
Yeah,
than
I
me
can
feeling
see
like,
that. I feel like part of what it's trying to do as a storytelling device is continuing to just kind of pile on the sense of overwhelming, like like this is a very different place, and it's just like it's one thing after another. Oh my gosh, so many things. What a crazy place this is, right? And I and to also kind of be some world building, right? Like it's the idea this is a whole nother world with people and cultures and organizations, and they have their own things, and it's not just everybody standing around in a field until Dorothy shows up.
right.
Because just the storytelling, I mean, this obviously comes from the original book, but just the storytelling of we don't even ever meet the witch that was terrorizing these people, that now Dorothy is the hero for having accidentally crushed this character that we never even see except for her feet under the house.
Yeah, well, unless you watch Wicked,
Well, yeah,
which
yeah.
I do have to give it credit. I mean, that is one thing that it reiterated for me. Even though, I mean, the time when I first saw Wicked, I
Hmm.
thought it was absolutely clever. Um, but now going back and rewatching this and seeing how, I mean, Wicked is written to counteract this movie, not the original book. Like, it
Yeah,
is absolutely meant to beat everything with this, and the way it treats the Munchkins, like, it's super smart and super clever.
yeah.
And so I really, yeah, it made me giving me a further appreciation for that, even as much as I appreciated it the first time I saw it.
Yeah, I agree. Wicked is great. I mean, it not only has some just, top notch show tunes, um, but yeah, but just the way that it kind of reinterprets some of these tropes from the original story, and reimagines aspects of that. Because I will say that in this movie, the biggest point of me going, "Ew," was when Glinda says, "Only bad witches are ugly." And I'm like, oh, oh, really? No, you just didn't have to say that. You could have just not said that line, and I think we would have all been happier. But
Right.
because it's because like it's first of all it's responding to Dorothy having this preconception that a witch must be ugly, and you're not ugly, therefore must not be a witch. I don't understand. But then explaining like it's a rule that only bad witches are ugly, and it's like, and this is Glinda the Good Witch, like supposedly like this sort of demigod character in the story, telling us
Yeah,
that that's the rule. You
I
know?
know, and that's what, again, to go back to how clever Wicked is. Like, the
Mm-hmm.
way they treat Glinda is amazing.
Yeah.
Because they kind of pick on that exact part of this movie.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
sorry to keep bringing that up. I
Well,
just
no, no. I mean, I think it's entirely appropriate to bring it up because, of course, a great musical, so it's worth talking about all on its own. But I mean, it's like it's written as a direct response to a lot of the things in this movie. So, like, I think it's entirely appropriate to bring it up. But yeah, I will agree that like the Munchkin Land's not my favorite part. But what did win me over in all, had me grinning, throughout, was exactly what you said. Like it's the songs and it's the performances of the leads, right? And just when we meet the Scarecrow, and he's just so floppy in all of the ways that you'd expect, just in terms of acting like this animate rag doll, right? And then of course, like the Tin Man, his whole little dance routine that he does, like the bit where he's going to fall over and he's like leaning way over, and they've obviously done a trick to make his feet stuck to the ground so that he won't fall. But it's just the bit where they're trying to catch him, but he's going whoa, whoa. And then of course the bit when he does the steam whistle and the steam comes out of his little hat, and it's just like it's kind of so unexpected and surprising, but it's exactly what you want to happen in that song. It's just like when it happens, you're just like, yay, that's great. And like the songs are like they're classics for a reason. I mean, they're good songs. And they're very catchy, and I found myself again. I'm just a little bit surprised to have found it working its magic on me again. For the first time in a long time.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. I didn't not enjoy myself.
Mm-hmm.
It just like I said, that's why I said it wasn't like it was above that.
Mm-hmm.
I was engaged with it, and I can totally respect some of that stuff. I just never got back from like that initial like God, that was annoying of an
Mm-hmm.
opening. Like, and then I got better and enjoyed myself, but it was just kind of
Yeah. I one thing that occurs to me to mention is just the fact that obviously the actors playing the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and the Cowardly Lion are the same actors as playing the farmhands, back in the Kansas sequence, right? But like I know that because I know that, not because I could tell. Like maybe I have just like teensy bit of I don't have face blindness, but I think I'm not as good at it as some people are, because the whole bit when she's like at the end and you were there and you were there, like I feel like I would not have gotten that if I didn't just know that it was the same actors. Maybe from the voice, but I don't know, just the makeup that they're in is transformative enough that it completely breaks my ability to recognize them.
hmm.
Um, I guess that's not important, but I
Yeah.
think
Well, I'm just trying to think because it's so hard for me to kind of unwind that because I don't remember if I recognized it earlier. I mean, I definitely see it now.
mhm.
But again, to your point, I'm not sure if I see it now because I just see it or if I see it now because I know it. And it's hard for me I can't really work that through that. So
Right. I think the
feel like I
trick for
recognize them, but
yeah, the trick for me, I think, is essentially the specific difference of when I was watching the first Kansas segment, I knew that the actors were the same, but I was having trouble saying, and this one is the Scarecrow and this one is the Tin Man.
okay. Well, I definitely could tell then. So
Hmm.
we did see it a little differently.
Yeah. In any case, I think it's a really cool sort of storytelling element to have the movie really it's it's like Inception in the sense that it never really confirms one way or another. Was she definitely dreaming, or did she really go, or like it seems most likely, you know from an adult mindset, that she was just dreaming. She hit her head when the storm was going, and that's all that happened. She dreamed it all. But within the story, like she even concludes at the end that she must have been dreaming, right? But I think it's cool that the movie never really quite says that, right?
Right.
I just having it, but at the same time, even during the tornado sequence, which frankly, like the tornado effect that they used is kind of amazing for the era, right? Because it's all practical. They rigged up it's like a 35-foot long, like sort of the equivalent of a great big pantyhose, um, that they made, but it looks really good. And considering that everything's a set and it's all this big miniature thing that's in the background, but like when we start seeing her in the storm and she's seeing like the old lady in her rocking chair smiling and waving as she passes by the window, it's kind of like there's already a sense of unreality there. Um, uh, and then there's of course the big change is going from the sepia toned monochrome
Yeah.
into color, which I mean it's like obviously this was not the first color movie, but when you talk about using new cinema technology for storytelling effect, that's pretty amazing.
Yep. Oh yeah, I agree. I think that is a cool effect. Yeah.
Yeah, just
And so, well, and that's one thing I meant to look up and didn't before we got on here. Do you know, was it shot in color or was it all shot and then colored afterwards, like the way they kind of colored some old black and white
I I guess I it never really occurred to me to ask that. My assumption was always that it was shot in color. I mean, the technology existed when the movie was made.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I thought, but it's just the colors are kind of overly rich,
Well,
and I think
yeah.
that's a technique,
Hmm.
but
I
it
mean, I
did
think
remind me of when when they went back and actually like painted over like Casablanca and stuff that was
right.
just atrocious. That they
Yeah.
should never have done, but they
Well,
did.
I think that's true of a lot of the early color movies though. It's just the color processing that they had at the time kind of produced that sort of high saturation, high contrast color. You know what I mean? It's not as naturalistic looking, so it does have some of that same feel as the colorization does, but I think it was filmed in color.
Yeah, I just looked it up. So it filmed in Technicolor.
Hmm.
Um, and it's actually the black and white parts were the ones that were colored.
Oh
So
yeah,
it was shot in straight black and white, but then it was sepia toned.
right.
So that was the part that was so the other way completely. Yeah,
Hmm. Hmm. And of course, like I
that's
think
sort
that
of I think why it's so rich. That original Technicolor wasn't it? I mean, isn't it just like it's like a three strip thing? It's like an RGB.
yeah,
So there's
I think so. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
so the way it just layers, like you end up with very rich colors because it's a pure mix.
hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, so
And I mean, it's one of those things where movies kind of stopped looking like that just because, once they kind of had the capacity to make it look a little bit more like what the eye sees in real life, they kind of went with that, when the technology of it improved. But, that's it's almost just like on the poster, you have these much sort of simpler colors. And I think part of that comes from set design too, right? Like they chose costumes and colors and sets intended to make the colors pop, right?
yeah, the red ruby slippers, the yellow
Mm-hmm.
brick road. Yeah.
Yeah. There's not a lot of complex shades. Things are in solid colors. Um, it just makes me think of the horse of a different color, where apparently they used Jello crystals to like Jello packs to color the horses.
Mm.
At least in the trivia section, that's what it says, and it says they had to hurry to get the shot after doing each die because the horse would lick it off themselves otherwise. But like that's a good example of something I think that is like it in some respects you could say it's almost just kind of like a dumb pun, right? Like that's a horse of another color is just a figure of speech, but to say this is a horse of another color that turns all sorts of weird colors and every time you look at it it's a different color. And that's just kind of a neat delightful thing, but then it's pulled off with these really vibrant bright colors that look good, right? I mean in the sense that it does not look like a cheap effect. It looks, I mean, because essentially what they actually did is really make the horse that color, right? It's not really a special effect so much as they actually put colored stuff all over the horse. But it looks
Right.
good. It looks like the horse is that color, even though it's an unnatural color. Although that actually just reminds me of the one other line in this movie that always just reads as creepy to me, which is the line in the cleaning ourselves up to see the wizard, where where Dorothy just casually asks if the color of her eyes can be dyed to match her gown, and they go, "Uh-huh," and I just sort of feel like that's that's weird. It's weird that she would ask, and also weird that they say yes, as though that's, oh, of course we can. But I don't know, maybe that's it's not necessarily sinister, but it does just it always plays as strange to me. Um,
Yeah.
uh, but like, let's talk about the wizard, and in particular, of course, the first meeting where the disguise doesn't slip, right, and it's just this really scary, imposing face that's demanding the booming voice and asserting all of that, right, and it's but then the reveal that he's a humbug. He's a fraud. I think that bit is very internalized to me in my love of con art, like lovable con artist characters. I mean, to the point where, like, as like a podcaster streamer, when I am like embarrassed by some technical difficulty, I will sometimes say like, "Pay no attention to the girl behind the curtain," like, and it's just because everybody knows the reference that I'm making, and they get what I'm saying, right? And it's like, but like, just as a storytelling thing, obviously it's another double, right? Because it's a double of the sort of fortune teller guy that Dorothy meets in Kansas at the beginning. Um, but as sort of like, telling a story for kids with a moral, having him be able to kind of simultaneously not be able to give them anything actually meaningful, but at the same time giving them the ultimate meaning by showing them that they did actually have what they wanted all along. Like, that is cool. I think that's a neat storytelling trick.
Yes. Yeah. I guess I didn't even think of it as a. I guess it is a trick because of that. But yeah, just the idea that you always have it inside you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just whether or not you choose to like believe it or execute it or whatever. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think it is a cool message from the movie
Yeah.
completely. And I guess to your point, he's an interesting character to deliver that lesson.
Right. It's because a lot of what it comes down to is the gifts he does actually give them is essentially acknowledgement, right? Because think about it, like with the Scarecrow, what I love about this story, the Scarecrow thinks, "Oh, I have no brains, I'm dumb," but we see him throughout the movie always coming up with the plans, right? He's the one that knows everything. He's the one that comes up with the plans. He's the one that takes charge when charge needs to be taken. Of course he's got smarts, right? Whether he has a brain or not. And so what does the wizard give him? A diploma, which is essentially acknowledgement. And it's saying, you are smart. You're already smart. And to prove it, we're going to give you something that you can look at to, when you start to doubt yourself, you can look at this and say, this proves it. And it's kind of like against sort of like imposter syndrome or self-doubt and that sort of thing, right? And so likewise, the Tin Man, it's the same thing. He says, "Oh, I have no heart, no emotions," and yet we see that he's the most sentimental throughout the story.
Right, he's the one that like cries and stuff.
Yeah, he's the one always getting weepy about everything, and the one who is determined to challenge when people are saying mean things and that sort of thing. And then it's the same with the Cowardly Lion, of course. Like, we see that although he professes this cowardice, we see him stand up to danger lots of times. And so what do they get? Well, the Tin Man gets well, it's shaped like a heart. I'm just suddenly trying to
Like a
remember.
watch or something, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's like it's a watch. Like, and
Yeah.
so it ticks, right? Like, and so that's part of like why he's like it, because it's like it has a heartbeat to it. But it's so like the mean the point just being it's like it's I think that one like visually is a stand-in for the heart more than it like the symbolism of the watch, so to speak. But the point of it is still the same of saying that like if you need to have a thing that you can look at to remind you that you actually have this inside, here it is. And for the lion gets a medal, right? Um, and but with Dorothy, I think again, it's a cool thing to have happen in a story for kids to say, "I'm sorry, I don't have what you needed." Like, well, we can maybe try this balloon and go home, but then that doesn't work. And there's a lot of like cascading levels of like excitement, then disappointment, and eventually it all works out, obviously. But to have just that moment of I can't help you. Oh, wait, maybe I can. But then there's an accident and the balloon's flying away and he can't do anything about it. And we just, again, sort of like the wizard leaves the story being totally useless. Yeah. Terribly sorry. Can't come back for you. The ropes got they let go of the ropes. Nothing to be done. Sorry. Bye. Um, but, uh, but just the disappointment there. But then, like, oh, but it was the slippers all along. But the reason it's not that the slippers are the magic thing that lets her go home so much as it's kind of like this, she had to have that lesson of, oh, well, you had to want to be back at that place. Like it had to be more meaningful to you than just, oh, I'm in a strange place, I probably should go back home. It was recognizing that home represents things that you do actually want to have in your life and that you miss when they aren't there. Now, we could also maybe get into a little bit about like, I think it's probably fair that some people grow up in places where they want to leave and they shouldn't be told that they're wrong for wanting to leave. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that. I don't think that's a universal thing to tell someone that, if you feel like your home doesn't have the things that you want it to have, you should just understand that home has really always been there, and you should just stop looking to find what you need elsewhere in the world because it's all right there at home where you are already. So don't mess up the status quo or make waves. Just be satisfied with what you have. And I feel like I'm not sure that's sometimes true, but but not always.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there is. There's it's that expression that the grass always looks greener and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. Like to, I think it's a good message that you know it everything is not always better somewhere else.
Yeah.
But to your point, yes, there are definitely circumstances where things are better somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Yeah.
that message exists because there are a lot of people who do live in a perfectly fine situation, and and while yes, there could be a better one, they don't recognize the problems that come along with that. And it's a hard message to put into a movie like this, that the complexity of like, again, take out the extreme situations
Mm-hmm.
where it's like clear you should not be in this home or this
Yeah.
place, but just a general, you know, misconception that like people who have more money or live in better houses or live in a nicer community,
Mm-hmm.
like they are all still human beings, and there's some demon or some, you know, problem or some stress that they have that you don't recognize, and that but that's a very complex message.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a simplistic way of getting at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely true that we can get so caught up in dreaming about what could be if we just were over the rainbow, um, and thus fail to appreciate the actual good things about where we are. I think that's certainly true, but it's also like we were just saying, it's not universal that you don't need to look anywhere else for what you need. It's all right there at home, and if it's not, then you should be satisfied with it anyway.
Right.
And it's like, but that's really only a problem if you are trying to make the case that this is a universal lesson that applies to everyone, which is maybe more. It's asking the movie to do more than it's actually trying to do.
Right. And and the reality of the lesson is, I mean, there most situations, even if they are could be improved, the improvement is not from some magical crossing the rainbow to a
Mm-hmm.
new place. Like the improvement has to be done a, a different way, just
Yeah.
a more diligent, methodical way.
I think one minor complaint I have is that they really never resolve the conflict that starts the story, namely that the mean lady from the bank is going to take Toto to get killed, right? Like Toto escapes and Dorothy finds him and they're going to run away so that Toto doesn't get killed. But then the fortune teller says, "Oh, but think how sad your aunt will be." And she's like, "Okay, I guess I'll go home." But Toto is still in danger, and then that never really gets resolved. And I feel like I would have liked a line or two to just fix that.
Yeah.
I feel like the one that adult me wants that probably would not have been appropriate in a movie for kids is that that mean lady got sucked up by the tornado. Um, but yeah, but I do have that minor critique just because watching it this time, I was invested in the idea that it was this actual tricky thing of like, this lady literally does have the power to say, if you don't turn this dog over just because I say so, I not only will get the sheriff to come and arrest you because I managed to bully them into giving me a court order, but I could potentially have the bank call in the loan on your house. And it's
Yes.
like, that sucks. But what are you going to do, right? What's the solution there? That's hard. And then they just never really resolve it, which kind of, I was waiting to see what that was because I didn't remember. And the reason I didn't remember is because there's nothing. But, um,
It's because when she melted her over in Oz,
yeah, yeah.
it
I,
killed her back in the regular land too.
yeah. Well, and I think there's literally some truth to that, not in the text of the story, but in like the subtext, in the sense of what the shape of the story
Right.
is, that
Because Dorothy
that
defeated her back.
character has been defeated,
Right.
right? So we don't have to see her again. It's not a problem anymore, even if they don't explain how.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean that's exactly. I mean that was well saying it in a joking way. I mean that is what I was saying is
Yeah.
the interpretation.
No,
Is
yeah.
character's been defeated, so we don't have to address it. But to your point, when you want to watch it with a more nuanced, viewing, it is odd that because they can't directly call it that because then it would trip up the idea that there's this ambivalence as to whether it's a dream or a
Hmm.
reality.
Um, I
Yeah,
while we're talking about the witch, I think it's kind of incredible that performance combined with like the makeup and costuming, because it's such an iconic character. And yet if you just add up like what are the things that the witch actually does on screen, it's really not very much. She really doesn't actually do very much. She shows up and she says mean things for a little while. She sends the flying monkeys, I guess. She causes some other mischief. She makes the poppies make them fall asleep, which is all a little confusing. And then she gets dispatched crazy easy by something we didn't even know is a thing until it happens, right? And then all of her soldiers are like, "Oh, she's dead? Great, you can go." That's no longer a problem. I was actually that was another little detail that I couldn't quite remember when I was watching this time, is like she has lots of guards around. Like what happened? What did they do when the witch is defeated? And it turns out like, oh, they're glad and they decide to let Dorothy go and it's fine.
well, I mean, I think again, just to remind, that's part of the cleverness of Wicked is taking on the fact that she doesn't have a ton in this movie, so
Hmm.
you got a pretty good canvas you can work with.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you only have to hit a few beats to make it match what happened in this movie.
Well, and the thing is too that one of my favorite details about Wicked is that the idea that water would melt her is stupid.
Yep.
And it is portrayed all along as that is some stupid peasant superstition. Of course, there's no truth to it because that's stupid. What are you talking about? It's bizarre that anyone would think that. And yet, she then takes advantage of the fact that this superstition has spread to fake her death.
Yes.
And I think that's great. I think that's my favorite little just clever subversion of that element of the story.
Right. Because that's what I was saying. Like they took all the points that you just made,
Mm-hmm.
and they turned it against this movie, which is
Yeah.
the fact that there's not a ton that she does. So you can totally reattribute all of these actions. And the fact that the way she's dispatched is so ridiculous that it might as well have been her faking her own death because
Yeah.
it is that silly. You know?
Well, and and again, a lot of the stuff like the sending the flying monkeys is probably the most destructive thing she actually does, right? Because it seems like falling asleep in the poppies could have been bad, but then wasn't because they got to wake up, right? Like, so nothing really happened. But then there's also like the Surrender Dorothy skywriting that freaks everyone in the Emerald City out, and everyone's like, "What? But why though?" I feel like they if they wanted to include more exposition, what they maybe could have made a little bit more clear is that the witch can't get at Dorothy because Dorothy's protected by Glinda, but that's not necessarily true of everyone else. You know, but at the same time, I mean, my understanding just from reading about it is that there actually was more witch stuff originally that they cut literally because the performance they thought was maybe going to be too scary for the little kids that were the intended audience. So, you know, and the other thing is too that I think a lot of these things are things that we can discuss and question sort of after the fact, but do they really need to be in the movie? Probably not. I think the movie is sort of very economical with not over-explaining things that don't need to be over-explained. You know, just like, you know, it's like the whole thing with the guards is like, do we want to have a 5-minute scene about negotiating with the guards to let them go? Not really. We defeated the witch. We're ready to move on to the next story beat. You know, we don't care about those guards. So, give them one line to say, "No, we're happy she's gone. You're good," and move on. I think that's good. And yeah, so I think that this story it probably does have like I think it's really good and it deserves its classic status, but I think it's also another one of those movies that we've talked about, like when we talked about Shawshank Redemption and It's a Wonderful Life, that part of where it got its insane classic status is from being played on TV over and over and over. You know, and so that's why you have generation after generation who still all think of this as this childhood classic, even though it came out, what, like
40?
1939. Yeah. So I was going to do the math of like how many years ago was that, you know, so it's like, you know, it's, yeah. And so, you know, it's that old, but now, you know, we have people who, you know, who were kids when that came out that now have great grandchildren that might watch it. You know, it's like, it's how the fact that it is still something that, that people know about and talk about and consider it like, you know, I think part of it is, again, it's just like the fact that it's has color bits probably makes a big difference because there are a lot of people who just, if it was all black and white, they're just not going to watch it. But it's just silly, and there's nothing really in it aside from a couple of questionable lines that makes it unsuitable. Like, you could show it to really little kids, and it's fine. Like, really little kids, like you might think that the trees with the mean faces that throw apples are scary, or the flying monkeys were scary, or something like that. But generally speaking, it's suitable for all ages. It's got great songs. It's an enduring classic because it's great.
Yes, all of those things I agree with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did. I think my opening was just to kind of counter your opening,
Oh,
but
sure.
the reality is, like, yeah, I mean, I respect everything this movie
Mm-hmm.
did. I think I'm not taking it off the list by any means. To your
Yeah.
point, it's 80 years, and the the performances hold up.
Mm-hmm.
The theme holds up. It The audience reception holds up. So just
Mm-hmm.
because I don't find it one of my top 10 movie watching experiences anymore doesn't mean it's a bad movie. Like,
Yeah.
it's still very iconic. It did a lot of things, um, to the point of like playing with the technologies. I mean, these are things that lots of movies have taken on since then. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily just using the black and white versus color, but maneuvering the story based on new and upcoming technologies
Mm-hmm.
and old technologies, kind of trying to play them against each other. I mean, all those things were kind of, that groundwork was laid by what they did here.
Mm-hmm.
And and I'll just leave it at the end. I mean, I know I said this earlier, but the physical acting of the three. I mean, obviously Judy Garland, from
Mm-hmm.
her
Yeah.
dance presence is good, but the body manipulation that those other three guys can do is, I mean, on par with the best ever. And so you can't take that away from this movie either.
Yeah.
It
Um,
adds to the character of those songs to see those guys do that stuff.
yeah, absolutely. I was just looking up the awards. It won for Best Original Song Over the Rainbow, which ironically was a song that they talked about cutting because it was extending the length of the Kansas sequence and they wanted to go ahead and get her to Oz already. But I think for, musical structure today, the idea of cutting your I Wish number is insane. You don't cut the I Wish number. That's what establishes the drive for the whole story.
Right. And it is just, I mean, as far as a vocal performance out of her, I mean, it is,
Yeah.
I mean, it's Adele level kind of stuff, like, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
you don't get rid of that,
Yeah. So, and then it won for Best Original Score also. It was nominated for, but did not win, Best Picture, Best Color Cinematography, Best Art Direction, and Best Effects. I was trying to look up what beat it for Best Effects, and I'm actually not seeing that. But a lot of the other things that it lost, well, it was up against Gone with the Wind that year. So, not to mention Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and Love Affair and Stagecoach. So there's a lot of there's a lot of good movies that year.
I'm just still baffled by that song thing. I hadn't read that before.
Oh, just about. Well, like
I mean,
I
and to my point, like, I made the joke about Adele, it would be like Frozen cutting Let It Go,
yeah,
like, because it made her look like more evil or whatever. I don't know, whatever they wanted to do. I mean, but it's
yeah,
it's 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 insane, like you said.
yeah. Apparently, the movie that won Best Special Effects was called The Rains Came, and so maybe that's an example of one where, like, I don't know, I haven't seen it, so maybe if you watch it and you'd say nothing about this is memorable except the effects are really good. I don't know, but yeah, just I can see that the reason, it's wanting to get her to Oz quicker. I can see that, but the idea of cutting the song is the wrong way to go about it. Um, yeah, so I think, you know, um, the one more thing that I will say is that even as we talk about, like, well, okay, yeah, maybe it didn't win Best Picture because it's up against Gone with the Wind or whatever, but I know Gone with the Wind is further up the list. We haven't watched it yet, but like, I don't think I'm gonna leave Gone with the Wind higher than Wizard of Oz. So we'll see when I rewatch it. It's been a while.
I know, yeah, and I don't know. Like, that is, as we've talked about, it's going to be a complicated one
Yeah,
because I remember it being pretty epic. to the
Yeah.
point where I enjoy it. But there are, I'm gonna have to rewatch it. I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
see
Well, that's because there
things that
have
I
been.
know are kind of concerns with it. Like
Mhm.
you know, I feel right now like I'm could be okay with,
Yeah.
but I also haven't seen it in a long time, and so I may have it, for lack of a better term, a whitewashed.
Well, right, yeah. I mean, but
Of
there,
what the movie
yeah,
is.
there's been
But
lots of examples of that as we've gone through the list of movies that we sort of feel like we know, and we sit down to watch, but then we may find that we're surprised one way or the other with how we feel when we actually watch it. I just know that the last time I watched it was a long time ago, and when I watched it then, I remember my primary thought being, this movie is so long.
well, we're gonna get there soon enough.
Yeah.
If are we allowed to watch it? Still, I can't remember.
Huh?
If we're allowed to watch it again.
Oh, I mean, oh, to
Well, because they took it off of some streaming services for a
Oh
while.
no, it's back already. They what they did is they re-uploaded it just with a special like introduction to put some of the stuff in context.
Okay, I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I was just actually looking it up, and sure enough, it is 3 hours and 58 minutes long.
Holy
Gone with the Wind.
fuck!
I know, right? That's what I was talking. That's what I was saying. But
Jeez,
anyway,
I'm gonna need to watch. I'm gonna need a whole week just to watch that.
well, we've got a little while still, right? Hang on, actually, I don't have the list up. I don't remember what's next, but we're actually not at that point of the show yet. So I think
Let's
we've
move. Yeah,
we've talked
let's.
about Wizard of Oz. So now let's move on to number 9, Vertigo, the Alfred Hitchcock, uh, one of his later films, 1958, all in color. Although some of his movies that were black and white could have been in color, as we just established.
Mhm.
But this one was all in color. Um, when was North by Northwest? What year was that? I'm looking it up now, just because that one obviously also was in color. Um, that was 1959, so I guess that was actually a year after this one. Um, but yeah, so let's talk about Vertigo. Do you want to get us started?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff in Vertigo, but there's some kind of parts where it's like I feel like I think what they're trying to do, but it doesn't necessarily hit home. I think the way it was intended to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so Jimmy Stewart is our main character.
Mm-hmm.
He has vertigo that he gets from essentially it's a fear of heights for him.
Right. And he gets it from a traumatic experience.
Yes.
Uh,
Um, but it leads to obviously some clever filmmaking for
mm-hmm.
how it makes you feel disoriented when he is disoriented. From a number of things, from straight effects of like when he is climbing heights and
Mm-hmm.
the way that the kind of zoom shifts, which makes you feel disoriented, to even some of the storytelling pieces
Mm-hmm.
where when he is experiencing trauma and stress, the story gets a little disjointed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a weird kind of a catch 22 effect because it makes the story make less sense when you're watching it, but it's trying to create an effect within you,
Mm-hmm.
because it is complicated. He meets Kim Novak,
Mm-hmm.
who's phenomenal in this, for the role she's asked to play.
Well, yeah, sort of dual role.
Yeah, sort of a dual role that we're not really
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's well, yeah, because she's kind
It,
of
it
yeah,
is
that's where the whole
one
mystery.
person who herself is playing two roles, right?
Right, because the
Yeah.
first character that we meet her as, she's actually faking to
Right.
be another character to trick Jimmy Stewart,
Right.
so that when that character, who we never meet, I don't think, is
Right.
killed.
Yeah. I mean, we literally only see her dead body when we don't even know that it's a separate person.
Right. So this other, yeah, basically she's pretending to be the wife or girlfriend, I can't remember, of
Wife. Yeah.
wife of, yeah, of another character who ultimately kills his wife and we're meant to believe that it's the Kim Novak character, but then, and that's again,
Yeah.
so Jimmy Stewart
So
is chasing them up this, which is an iconic part of the movie. He's chasing up this lighthouse, and the
it's
girl,
Bell Tower.
bell tower, sorry.
Mm.
And that's what causes the trauma, and that's where it leads to the disorienting part. So he's disoriented, we're disoriented. All of a sudden, she shows back up. She's not the same person. He's not sure. We're not sure, even though it's clear she looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, we find out that what she did was she faked to be the wife who was
Mm-hmm.
already dead, so it could
Right.
look like she fell
So
off the
yeah.
tower, blah,
So
blah, blah, blah. And then she ultimately falls off the tower with this weird thing of like manifest destiny.
yeah, I'm going to want to talk about that
I know
a
you
lot.
are.
But yeah. So essentially, what we have is a complicated murder plot where what we have is this billionaire or millionaire, I don't know if they ever established that, rich guy wants to bump off his wife, knows that, hey, this guy that I used to know became a big police, big guy with the police, but then had this traumatic thing happen to him where he had to leave the force because now he's got this fear of heights. So here's my clever plan. I'm going to hire him to follow around this, my girlfriend, or I guess she was his girlfriend.
It wasn't clear if she was a girlfriend or just
Yeah.
hired.
Well, yeah,
I think
yeah,
at some point it did say, but yeah,
yeah.
it wasn't.
So
It wasn't obvious.
I think it was left deliberately a little ambiguous. I think,
Okay.
but in any event, to hire this woman this woman who's not my wife is going to pretend to be my wife for Scotty, Jimmy Stewart's character, for his benefit. And we're going to play act that there's this whole thing where she's maybe losing her mind because of this obsession that maybe she's being possessed by this woman from the past. And there's this whole complicated thing of like, do we believe in ghosts? Do we think that's what's happening? But the whole thing meant to culminate in this big moment where we know he won't be able to follow her because of his fear of heights. And we're going to use that to fake him out into thinking that she has died, when in reality, the wife who has already been murdered is going to be thrown out of the tower in her place while she's just hiding up there. And we know that he won't figure it out because his vertigo will prevent him from getting to the top where he would have seen that happen.
Right.
But then that's just the first half of the movie. And the second half is the guy got away with it once he was done using. It was Judy is the Kim Novak's character's real name, right?
I think so.
Judy Barton, yeah, and Madeline Elster was the fake wife name. But so Judy, when once he didn't need her anymore, Elster just dumped her. And so she's going back to sort of normal life, but then, and she had kind of fallen for him a little bit, but not enough to stop doing the plan. She kind of felt trapped by it, I guess. But in any event, he finds her, recognizes her, but assumes that she must be a different person, except she looks so similar to this woman he's now obsessed with because of this traumatic experience where he thought he was trying to protect this woman that he was falling in love with and who died. Due to his failing, he thinks. So he starts trying to remake her into this, back into the woman he thinks he loves, which we have then learned at that point was always a creation. So she is in the tough position of realizing she actually loves him, but recognizing he doesn't love me, he loves the fake me.
Right.
And she's having to decide, do I love him enough to try to be that for him? And I think it's really interesting that in that second half of the movie, I was surprised in a rewatch forgetting how quickly they reveal that to us, the audience. Like, once he runs into her again, it's not very long before they have her reveal to the audience what is happening. Right?
Right.
And so from that point on, it's really about like dual protagonists. She really becomes a new parallel point of view character with Jimmy Stewart's character. In fact, you could almost argue that she is more the point of view character at that point because she's the only one with all the information.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
So
So she's the one that we are in the same boat with, and Jimmy Stewart's character isn't anymore because now we know something he doesn't.
I forgot you're gonna drop all your Roger Ebert stringing knowledge on us, aren't
Well,
you?
I mean I think that's maybe why I just have some of this kind of just maybe down, but I don't think I have like specific anecdotes or anything like that.
Well, I mean, at least tell anybody who's listening what you
Oh yes.
experienced.
So back when I was in college at the University of Colorado, they every summer would have this sort of conference that they called the World Affairs Council. And one of the things that would happen there is that Roger Ebert came to the campus and would do these things called a cinema interruptus. And what that is it's for 5 days, 2 hours each day, where the first day you watch a movie just from start to finish. And then in the session for each of the subsequent days, you start it up, and anyone in the audience at any point can say stop, and they'll pause the movie, and then everyone just discusses whatever just happened. And then when you finish the discussing whatever that one bit is, you kind of start it up again, and you just go along the whole movie like that, and you kind of really end up sort of discussing these movies kind of like shot by shot. And the two movies that I got to see that way are Dark City and this. So I saw it in a lot of detail with commentary from Roger Ebert, which was very cool. I definitely enjoyed that experience. So I think there's a lot to like in this movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But I will actually, I'm, despite kind of having talked mostly in sort of maybe positive terms so far, like I have problems with it too. And a lot of them are kind of the same ones as you, is that I feel like one of the big things that I feel almost viscerally in this movie is that he was limited by the time in which he was making it by what he could show on screen and what could be allowed to happen. Because this was Hays Code era stuff where literally like there were rules to say like if a character is sufficiently a bad guy character, they are not allowed to have a happy ending. And so, for example, one of the things that Hitchcock actually did win but had to film the scene of was they had concerns that Ulster, this bad guy, this rich guy, gets away with it. So we need you to film a scene where at the end, Jimmy Stewart and Midge, his lady friend there, are listening to the radio where they announce that he's gotten arrested and he's going to go to jail. And they made him film that scene because it's not allowed that bad guy could get away with it. And so he eventually didn't have to put it in the movie, but it's kind of just an illustration of what I'm saying, where I feel like there are things that are confused in this movie that would not have been confused if he really could have done anything he wanted. Because I think he was limited by what he would be allowed to show happening on screen. And I think the ending is one of those big things, is that the editing in the bit where Judy falls and or jumps at the very end, the editing for that is weird. It is not like it feels clumsy in a way that doesn't let us see what actually happened, which we know it's Hitchcock. So like we know that's not an accident, right? Like it wasn't just that he was sloppy and forgot to include the shot that would have made it clear whether she jumped or fell. And maybe the idea is you want it to be kind of ambiguous, but why though? And I mean, I guess that inspires people to talk about it, but I kind of have the feeling that part of it was that they did not want to have on screen any of the following options. She kills herself by jumping, or he throws her off the balcony, out of the tower because he is still not forgiving her, right? Neither of those things would probably be allowed to be shown on screen in a clear, unambiguous way.
Right.
And so I feel like what happens feels like a pulled punch to me. Like, let's leave it kind of ambiguous, and then people can kind of decide what they think happened. Like, did she jump? Did she fall? Was it this manifest destiny thing? Is all kind of this weird heightened reality thing? Like, it could be any of those things, but we have to speculate because the movie does not show us what happens. What we know is she is there begging to not be thrown off the tower. And then there's a mysterious shadowy figure that turns out to be a nun just checking on hearing voices. And then we hear her take 3 steps and scream, and then she is fallen. And we're like, but why did that happen? Was she startled out of the window? Did she jump? Why does the movie not answer that question? And I feel like it's because they felt like, maybe the whatever answer he would have wanted it to be felt like he wouldn't be allowed to get away with showing that on screen.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I didn't have all that context, so I took it as more of like the idea was that it was meant to be ambiguous, and like that's why I called it like that manifest destiny, like basically like, or just desserts or whatever you want to call it, like basically by her participating in the plot of pretending to fall off, like she manifested that she would eventually.
Yeah, and I mean, I like that as an explanation. And my only objection is, if that's what we're supposed to think, the movie doesn't do a good job of showing us that.
Right.
Right? We have to speculate because the movie doesn't show us. Right? And I like it as an answer. But again, it has to be speculation because we're not shown what happens. Like, and the thing is, like, Hitchcock is a skilled enough director. Do we really think he couldn't have made it clear if he wanted it to be clear? He had to have made it unclear on purpose, but why?
Yeah.
And honestly, I think there is maybe something to be said for the fact that would it be as memorable as an ending if it was obvious what happened? Like, whatever the answer was, would it have been as talked about if it was obvious what happened? Maybe that was why. Like, he wanted it to be ambiguous so that people would speculate. I mean, it's kind of like Inception again with this idea of like, well, is it a dream? Isn't it a dream? Is it the lady or the tiger? Just in the point, it's not identical, but it's the idea of the ending is more talked about and more memorable, perhaps, by virtue of it not satisfying us with a concrete answer.
Yeah.
Which I can accept as a possible reason for it being the way it is, which doesn't make me like it more.
Well, yeah, and I had even a different task than you because I watched this with my wife for her first time ever seeing it. And so we get to the end, and she looks at me, she's like, "Wait, she died anyway? That's dumb." And I didn't really have an explanation as to why it wasn't.
Yeah. Like, the thing is, it feels dumb.
I try to do everything we're talking about here, but like when you make it that like cut and dry, like,
yeah,
well, that's dumb.
Well, and the thing is, I think it only feels dumb because it feels like maybe an accident or it's unclear, and that feels dumb. Whereas I think, for example, if she was begging him, no, I can be her, I love you, but then he killed her anyway, like, that would be an intense, dark ending, but you wouldn't probably say it's dumb, right?
Yeah, no.
Or if he rejected her and she definitely killed herself, you probably wouldn't say that's dumb. It's dark again, right? And even
the implication I feel like is left to somebody who just kind of comes at it clean is that the nun startles her and she falls.
Yeah, I feel like that's the most sort of the easiest to conclude because we don't see it definitely tell us anything else.
right. And that's the part that feels dumb. That's where,
Mm-hmm.
I had to go back and kind of explain like the whole like manifesting of it and all
Right.
that. And she was like, well, that, because again, it's not clear. Like, so it's like, oh,
I would buy it more if they had established that there would be some reason why the silhouette of a nun would be especially scary or something. Like people talk about like, is it because she feels like it's the ghost of Carlotta, this woman who died that was supposedly like the basis for this phony story, like. But
right.
again, it's
Because
like,
then
but
you can create that manifest,
yeah,
of like, oh, this whole story she created ended up screwing her over because she was spooked by a ghost figure
right.
to fall off the tower that she faked to fall off before.
Right, but I feel like what's frustrating about any of those explanations is that the movie, if that's what the movie wants us to think, it does a poor job of being clear about it.
Correct, which is what Abby's summation of
Yeah,
that was done. Yeah.
yeah, and frankly, I agree with her. I think the ending in its current form is dumb. I don't like it. I
Right.
wish that even if the whole idea was to make it ambiguous and memorable, I think this is a perfect example of a movie that should not have an ambiguous ending. Or at least like it could be ambiguous in the sense of we don't know what happens next, but it shouldn't be unclear about what has just happened.
Right. And yeah, and there's a lot of things like it could have been that, like you said, that it's not allowed to show either of those dark pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or it could have simply been that, I mean, he might have miscalculated and said, like, with the whole, because the whole back half of the movie is meant to be kind of disorienting, like,
Yeah.
to the audience. And, like, maybe this was just sort of the culmination of a disorienting ending that just didn't quite click, and
Or
that
yeah.
would be the only other explanation, which I just offer an alternative that
Mm-hmm.
Hitchcock could have just miscalculated this,
Right.
and
Another way to think about it could be that we are sort of experiencing it from Scotty's perspective because he looked to see the nun and therefore was not looking at Judy when whatever happened happened.
right,
So the idea of us being frustrated not knowing could theoretically be us in the shoes of Scotty saying,
right, which goes
did she
back to the,
fall?
like,
Did she jump? What just happened?
yeah, making us feel like him in the disorientation part of it,
Right.
which again I think just would be a misfire
Yeah. Well,
on that.
right. Again, it's like if that's the intent, I don't think it does a good job of it.
Right.
Because we see a great, performance from Jimmy Stewart reacting to what has just happened, but it's all nonverbal and it doesn't, like there and again, just like the actual shot sequence of what happens then is like it's unclear and it's frustrating. I don't like it.
I
There
get it.
is yeah.
So can I tell you about the part of the movie that frustrates me more than the ending?
Go for it. Yeah.
Um, to use your term from The Wizard of Oz about the movie being economical,
Uh-huh.
the love interest between the two of them, I feel like, is made to be very economical in this movie. I think we are told they're in love. They
Mm-hmm.
are good actors and actresses who show they're in love. I do not feel like any of their interactions in this movie lead to the buy-in that they are at the level that the two of them feel that what creates this tension that is supposed to lead to the ending. So I'm already frustrated before we get to that part
Yeah.
because I'm not bought in, even though I know they're supposed to be. They both show it phenomenally.
Mm-hmm.
That just it. I just feel like I'm told, yeah, this is happening, but this is there is not enough
Mm-hmm.
in their interactions for me to really buy into that. And so that part has always left me a little bit flat
Mm-hmm.
before we even get to that part. So, like, to the point, had they shown that she rejects him and he pushes her off, or he rejects her and she jumps, I'm not bought in there because I don't see enough to make them, other than them telling me that they
Mm-hmm.
care that much about each other. I don't see enough in this movie. And I feel like it's at the expense of like all the other things they're trying to do. Like that part was just kind of like, oh, we're just going to say this part happens,
Mm-hmm.
and then we're going to be really cool with all these other parts. And that frustrates me more than the end.
No,
So,
and I could see that. One thing that I would say just about that ending sequence is that I feel like it it would not be the case that she rejects him and that's why he throws her. It would, I mean, because she was beseeching him to forgive her for the deception.
Right.
And so if he threw her out, it wouldn't be because she rejected him, it would be because she betrayed him and he doesn't forgive her. Right?
Right.
Um,
Fair. That's
but
yeah.
yeah, but I will agree with you, but with a little bit of nuance, because on the one hand, I feel like part of what you're reacting to is that what Scotty is going through is not love at all. It is obsession.
Fair.
And that goes for when he still thinks she's Madeline as well, right? Because it becomes this thing where the story, it's essentially Gavin Elster, the guy who did masterminded this whole thing, really knew what he was doing because it worked really, really well on Scotty. Because this idea of casting, finger quotes, Madeline as this poor broken little doll that needs to be saved by someone who feels like he has lost all the meaning in his life and can't do any of the important heroic things he used to do because of this failing that he has. And now, but I have the opportunity for you to save this poor little broken woman, this little songbird who, you know what? Maybe you don't even like me because I'm a rich snooty guy. And what will happen is that you will find that, hey, you know what? After you start following her around and watching where she goes and stalking her, and then you think saving her from a suicide attempt, maybe you're going to start to develop some unhealthy feelings about her. And so he does. And then it just gets worse when he believes he has built up all of this in his head and then fails because of the very weakness that is so central to who he is, that he spirals after that, sees her again, and now it's just obsession. And that is why once he realizes what has happened, he is dragging her up the tower to not only finally defeat this weakness, the vertigo, with rage, but to punish her for tricking him and breaking and making him think he was the broken one.
Yeah, I think that is probably exactly what it is. Is that it's by I think the movie cheats by putting her in love with him also, and
Yeah.
I think it denies her some agency. And maybe that would have changed like the ending. Like maybe it should have been that dark,
Mm-hmm.
in that our hero character is actually an obsessive
Yeah.
guy, even though he's ostensibly good. He
Mm-hmm.
has this bad streak and ends up killing the woman he's obsessed with.
Yeah.
And
Honestly, I feel like that is the ending that the rest of the story is building to. But then it pulls the punch at the end.
okay, well then in that case, I think we're both. Well, I guess both our frustrations are tied to the same thing then too,
Mm-hmm.
because that's my part is that it doesn't build the credibility that they are in love with each other,
Right.
because again, his obsession doesn't feel like love, and her reciprocation, there is no evidence that she should ever reciprocate this to him.
Yeah. Now, I
Yeah.
think part of where you can soften that a little bit, while I still mostly agree with you about that, but is just the idea that we have to remember on rewatching, and if you hadn't rewatched it recently or watched it like I did, where you saw 10 hours of it in a week, an important thing to remember is during that first half of the movie, she knows it's a scam, right? We have to remember she's not actually Madeline there.
Right.
And so there's the part that's always feels a little bit ooky when she has jumped into the water and he saves her and she wakes up having theoretically passed out, and she wakes up naked in his bed because he had to take off her clothes so they could dry. But the implication is that while she was unconscious, he took her to his home and undressed her and put her in his bed and has been sitting there watching her. Right? That's creepy already. Right? Um, but then when we have to say is she was faking the whole thing. She was not unconscious because she wasn't actually in some fugue state where she was jumping on. She was pretending to be unconscious and therefore let him do all of that stuff. And I think that part of what she's got going on, I think, is sort of the mirror image of his thing of she sees this looks like this broken man. What a terrible thing it is that this guy who must have been a good man has been brought to this state. And again, like when she first meets him with is part of the whole scam thing, like obviously like she doesn't know anything. He's like she knows, oh yeah, this is the guy that I'm supposed to fool. But then she starts feeling like, oh, this is a nice guy. And I think what happens is she starts feeling shitty about being part of the deception for this really nice guy. And I think that that starts to twist itself around in her head to different kinds of feelings.
Yeah,
But it,
and this is why again. I mean, I'm going to still leave this movie pretty high. I mean, it is all of these things. Like
yeah.
I think that there's such a bulk of really good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, like maybe if we were watching it back in 1958, like this would be. I mean, it would be on a level of cleverness that is just so beyond what we've ever seen. But now we can look at it, and we've seen it a number of times. There's just a couple of misfires, and
Yeah.
there's a couple of places where like you could have tightened it up a little bit. And again, maybe you're right. Maybe in 1958, you can't tell that story. Like you can't have your hero actually be kind of a creepy, crazy dude.
Yeah. I mean, just imagine, yeah, like having Jimmy Stewart
But I think that's what
throw a woman out of a tower at the end of a movie, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Which, to your point of like, could he not have been allowed to do that? You could definitely see Hitchcock wanting that to be the case because you're right. Like, they create this whole thing where he's super disarming, which is why you ultimately like buy in to that she fell in love with him because he is Jimmy Stewart. We know he's Jimmy Stewart. We know he's this disarmingly charming guy, but he's displaying all these really bizarre fucking things through the whole movie that. When you kind of step back, you're like, wait, why would she fall in love with him? He's been doing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And why is he in love with her? Because she's never actually like shown him anything. And then, like you said, it's obsession. But we don't think of Jimmy Stewart as the guy who's going to be the obsessed, crazy lover.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, he's broken by this disease and his state of life. And so there's all these layers there that it never... we can get to when we have this kind of a discussion, but it's just there. It's not in the movie.
Right. Yeah. That's why I agree with you about her, because even though, as I was just saying, I feel like you can sort of go back and psychoanalyze some of what's going on, revealing that it's also not really a healthy love for her either. I think it's tied up into, here is this good man who's damaged and I made it worse by deceiving him, but also maybe there's a part of me that likes being obsessed over, even at the same time that it's a little scary. Like, you can psychoanalyze that stuff, but it doesn't really, the movie doesn't really tell us that. We have to kind of intuit it. So, it is what it is. The one last layer, though, that we should talk about with it is the extent to which Hitchcock's own sort of personal issues / kinks come into this. Because one of the things that Hitchcock is most known for as a director, he has a type when it comes to leading ladies. And the fact that a big part of the plot of this movie is the lead taking this woman who is not quite right and obsessively controlling her, not this suit, not that suit, the one suit that I have in mind is the only one that will do, and it has to be that one, and it has to be just right, and your hair has to be the right color, and it has to be fixed the way I like, and all of these things have to be done exactly the way I want them, or else it's no good. And that's Hitchcock's thing. Like that, so many of the actresses that he worked with said that he was like that, and that he was extremely controlling, and that so in a lot of ways this movie is kind of, people theorize that he's kind of working on through some of his own issues with this movie. And so maybe part of what's happening when it fails to follow through on just straight up making Jimmy Stewart the bad guy is the idea that Alfred Hitchcock doesn't want himself to see himself as the bad guy. If Jimmy Stewart is kind of his stand-in, he wants him to go and up and look over the edge, but not jump, so to speak.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of interesting things to talk about with this movie, but as we've discussed, I think there are things I have a problem with. It's not my favorite Hitchcock movie. It's not even my second favorite. So it's like, it's got a lot of really cool things about it. I think it's kind of amazing how compelling it makes seemingly endless scenes of Jimmy Stewart driving around San Francisco. Like, it seems like that would be boring, and yet it's actually more compelling than you'd think. Here's another little random bit of trivia that ties into the whole falling metaphor, right? Because the fear of heights and falling in love and all of that stuff, spinning out of control and all of that thing. We only see him driving downhill. In the movie, we see so much driving, we only see him driving downhill.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize that. Yeah,
it's just a weird little random bit of trivia that's ultimately not that important, but I think it's interesting. But yeah, so I think that's where we've landed, so to speak, on Vertigo. Oh, the last thing I want to say is great score, right? Bernard Herrmann's score for this movie is incredible. Yeah, I mean, I was sitting down to watch it this time knowing mostly how I felt about it already. But boy, when that opening sequence comes in and the and then of course the music during that weird psychedelic freak out that Jimmy Stewart has later. Gosh, there's so much more I could talk about. We didn't even talk about Mitch, but that's okay. We can, we don't have. There's other places you can find more commentary about about Vertigo. So are we ready to rank?
Yep.
All right. Where are you gonna move The Wizard of Oz and Vertigo?
I've been dreading this part. Like at one point I wanted, like, because again, it just feel like the top 10 thing. So I was like, oh, well, let me just put it at 25, we're in the top 25, but do I really like it better than 2001 and To Kill a Mockingbird? Not really. I think I'm going to put it at 30 after Snow White.
All right. That's Wizard of Oz after Snow White?
Yeah, that was when I was there. I was trying to find my other Hitchcock movies were on here. Rear Window. I don't know. I think it's kind of better than Rear Window. I feel like I almost need to introduce like a.
Well, it's like I was saying, my two favorite Hitchcock movies are not even on the list. So,
I do like North by Northwest better than it. God, so I do have to send it way down there. I hate to do that to it, but I'm going to put it at 58. It feels terrible, but
after which?
After It Happened One Night ahead of Nashville.
Okay.
I feel bad having it there, but I think I do like Rear Window and North by Northwest better. I mean, I think it does different things than both of them. I think I just enjoy those movies better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I am moving the Wizard of Oz down to 21 after Do the Right Thing, but before Treasure of the Sierra Madre. So not, number 10, but pretty high.
Yeah.
Um, Vertigo, I am also going to be moving further down. Um, it's going to be below Psycho. It's going to be, where do I have North by Northwest? I'm looking, scanning at this revised list that we did the last time. Gosh, looking at this whole.
Got Rear Window at 51.
Oh, I took North by Northwest off. That's
Yeah,
right.
you didn't like it as
Because,
much.
well, again, as we
Oh, yeah,
discussed
too
last
many.
time, it was
Yeah,
really only on the basis of we've got so many Hitchcock movies already.
yeah.
So I think I'm moving Vertigo down. I'm gonna put it like, I guess that's gonna be 42 after The Graduate, but before Midnight Cowboy, which is perhaps a reminder that I have Graduate a lot lower than you do.
Yeah, God, The Graduate's so good. But anyway,
But
Graduate's almost in top 10 for me.
yeah, well, it might get there depending on how far down you move some of the movies to come, right? Right now you have it at 11, so you only have to move a couple of movies further down. It'll be in the top 10.
I'm not sure that these next two are going to move that
Yeah.
far. But
All right. Well, so let's talk about that. So I ended up with Wizard of Oz at 20 and Vertigo at 42. Actually, I said the numbers a little bit wrong now that I actually shifted it around. But the next movies that we're going to talk about, numbers 8 and 7, we have Schindler's List and Lawrence of Arabia. So Schindler's List, it's been a while for me, largely because I don't think of that movie as very fun to rewatch. Um, we'll
yeah,
see how I feel about it because I, yeah,
very.
yeah. I mean, it's really good, but again, like it's been so long since I watched it. I will have to see how I feel revisiting it. Just because I think my worry is that it's going to feel overwrought and manipulative in the way that Spielberg can sometimes. That's my fear in the rewatch. But maybe when I rewatch it, I won't feel that at all. So we'll see. Lawrence of Arabia, I rewatched actually just last fall when they brought it to the big screen, and so I got to go see it on the big movie screen back when that was a thing that people could do. So
There
that
was a
was.
time when I was younger that if I was, I could tell you that Lawrence of Arabia would be number one if I was re-ranking this list.
I feel like I like it a lot, and back when I first saw it, my feeling about it. Well, we'll talk more about it, but my feeling about it was that I like the first half more than the second half. But seeing it now, where I'm older, I'm a little more politically savvy. I see how the second half is actually really necessary. It's a little bit like with Fight Club, where it's so makes the first half so glamorous and appealing that it can be easy to just subconsciously forget the second half where it reveals that that was all terrible actually and you shouldn't have done it. So
One of my favorite movies of all time.
yeah,
As yeah,
it's incredible. I'm looking forward to rewatching it again. Schindler's List I'm more wary of because like I know it's good, but it just like that one I think hurts more to watch. But we'll see. So we'll be back next time to talk about Lawrence of Arabia and Schindler's List. But in the meantime, all you out there, even if you can't go to the theater, watch good movies.
a lot of ways to do it right now.
Mm-hmm.